This is Kayla Kurtz, and I want to take just a quick second to introduce our overall subject for today's webinar, as well as myself, and then I'll kick it over to Eric and let him introduce himself as well. So this month, we decided after last month's SEO PPC webinar between Hannafin and Interpromote and how awesome that went, that we really wanted to continue those and keep them moving and try to host at least once a month to really discuss PPC and SEO together as a package as opposed to an either-or situation. Keeping that in mind, however, one topic we did discuss last month was that you can't necessarily always have PPC and SEO turned on for your marketing campaigns at the same time. So what we're going to discuss this month is how to choose between PPC and SEO if you need to. So again, this is Kayla Kurtz, and I'm the paid search consultant at Hannafin Marketing, and I also write for our blog, PPC Hero. Eric, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Daffhorn. I'm the president at Interpromote, and I want to thank Kayla again for her great help this month in putting together a webinar that we think is going to have some really good information for you. Again, as she said, it came out of several of the questions that came up last month. You know, you're saying, well, these have to be done together, What if we only can do one? What if we only can do one? What if we have resources for one? What should we do, this or that? So the whole purpose of this webinar is built to address that question.
Awesome. So without further ado, I think we're going to go ahead and get started and jump into the content for this month. Really quick, before we go much further, I want to make sure everybody knows exactly what topics we're going to be really diving into today. So first up, we're going to discuss why it's preferred to have both PPC and SEO efforts implemented for your brand. Then we're going to discuss what situations are going to lead you to decide whether PPC or SEO is truly the best choice for you. We'll then talk a little bit about how a brand can truly make that decision. So after you've determined which situation you're in and you've looked at the options of PPC and SEO, really how do you make that final decision and move forward with one or the other? And then, of course, finally, the overall goal is always going to be how your brand is going to be able to work towards a marketing model that's going to pull SEO and PPC both up and allow both to run either simultaneously or on an alternative basis. That way you have an entire full web presence for your brand. Just as an additional note, we are going to go ahead and accept questions over Twitter as well as in the chat screen for the GoToWebinar panel. So absolutely feel free to send us questions in either medium, and at the end we're going to definitely take some time to answer a few questions. Any that we don't get to, we will make sure we post on PPC Hero with a follow-up and answer all the questions that come in. So we thank you ahead of time.
All right. Thanks, Kayla. Now, again, the whole purpose of this webinar is what if you have to choose between them? And so now you're roped into this and you're thinking, okay, here we go. Here's a PPC agency, here's an SEO agency. This is sort of like going to a restaurant and saying, what should I get, the steak or the chicken? And the server says, oh, they're both really good. I love them both. They're awesome. So yeah, I mean, guilty as charged. We each are big proponents of our own disciplines. No secret there. But the honest truth is, we've spent a lot of time contributing to each other's sections, both Kayla and I working back and forth over the last couple of weeks. And this webinar really came about by us really finding a lot of limitations within our own disciplines and helping the other person build his or her part of this. So I'm really happy about the introspection and the honesty about our respective disciplines that ended up producing this webinar. Really, in my opinion, the best way to get something out of the next hour is to listen to the descriptions that we give in section 2 and decide which one is a more accurate description of your situation. So with that, though, I'm going to give just a brief recap of why we really do recommend having both programs, both SEO and PPC going, if it's possible. Really, using SEO and PPC together is kind of like having a spotter at the gym. You know, you can say, look, give me 10 more of those, or your form really sucked on that. It's an objective look at the other side of the coin. They contribute a lot to each other. And let's talk about, the sheer reality of search result real estate. Between the main column and the right column, the joke about real estate is they're not making any more of it. And that's the absolute truth on search results pages too. They're, 10 years ago, we said, well, you better be in the top 30 listings or no one's going to find you. And today, good luck getting anybody to pay attention to, below the fold, let alone on page 2 or 3 of page 2 or 3 of results. So anything that can increase your visibility, in our opinion, is a good solution. And like we said, they can help each other out. For example, if you're doing some A/B testing on PPC with ad copy, you can really learn about how users are reacting to that and shape your own organic content, your meta descriptions based on that. Social media benefits both SEO and PPC right now. On a lot of paid ads, you'll see below them how many people have given this brand a +1 in Google Plus, or the sheer organic benefit of having a nice Google Plus profile for your business when it shows up in the right column. How much does that cost? That's free real estate taken up by your Google Plus profile. So social media, it benefits both of them, and in turn, they both benefit social media because they get the word out about your business. Obviously, then the best kind of puzzle is a complete puzzle. Now, when it comes to consumer confidence, people say, both paid search and search engine optimization, organic optimization, are both within the top 5 of where people feel very comfortable if they had to put all their marketing time and budget into only one channel. What I don't see here is Yellow Pages. I mean, we're both kind of checking out that corpse and saying, wow, how do we help people get the word out a little bit better? Because that a lot of traditional media forms, and maybe Yellow Pages does end up in this second traditional media column, those are shrinking up. You see Yellow Pages and things like that going from the doorstep to the recycle bin without ever hitting the planning desk in the house. So with that in mind, the mini sermonette for why you need them both is going to wind down. And really, we're getting to the core of the webinar today, which is why you would need one or the other and how to identify whether you need one or the other. And Kayla's going to start by talking about situations that make you choose PPC.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric. So as Eric said in the very beginning of that last section, we really did take an introspective look and truly decipher what situations are better for PPC or SEO. So I'm going to dive into the PPC situations that we truly believe are necessary to make the decision to move towards a PPC marketing scheme as opposed to SEO if you must choose one or the other. So first up, and I think this one is maybe fairly obvious, but let's say you need some data right away to report on. Obviously, SEO results take a little bit longer to truly mature and come back in so that you can see the return on any optimizations that you made. But with paid search, you get almost a right away result pool. You'll either be looking at, at least a few hours, definitely within days, you're going to have some sort of data that you can look at and understand where your traffic is coming from and how well the marketing campaign is really running. Second, if you have a product or service vertical that's full of a lot of short tail and highly competitive terms. As you can imagine, this can get incredibly expensive from a budget standpoint, but what you really want to make sure that you're doing is in paid search, you can attack all of those short tail competitive terms and you can really choose to rank a little bit higher, whereas with SEO, it's going to be much more difficult for those short tail phrases to get as competitive or up on the first or second page just due to the overly competitive nature of the industry. Third, let's say you absolutely know that your demographic data tells you your customers just respond better to ads. So this is a little bit more psychology based, and I'll give you a personal example of how I sort of do my online searching. If I'm looking, for example, for a brand that's going to provide me a service, I'm probably more likely to look at organic search listings. However, if I'm trying to purchase a product or like shop for something, I'm way more apt to click on a paid search ad. That's just my personal preference, and it's not obviously a hard and steadfast rule, but generally speaking, I have my own thoughts about what I'm going to look for and where I'm going to click to find that information. It's likely that a lot of your searchers have a similar or some sort of decision in their head about how they search, and you want to make sure you accommodate for that. If you know that your particular demo is very responsive to paid search ads over organic listings in particular, then definitely PPC is going to be the right choice for you and your brand. The final one on this slide that I wanted to talk about is that you need to do some real-time A/B testing. Again, this kind of just goes back to how quickly results can come back to you from an SEO or a PPC campaign. SEO takes a little bit longer to come back, and you can't necessarily split traffic to 2 separate landing pages or 2 separate messages in your ads or in your listings. So with paid search, if you really need to say, I'm not sure if message A or message B in my ad is going to be more successful, if you have 2 separate landing pages with different headlines and you're trying to determine which one your customers react better to, then you certainly want to move more towards a PPC method, at least for the time being, so that you can get that A/B test done quickly and efficiently and get back some statistically significant data. All right, so the second segment of situations that I think are really going to make you more beneficial for a PPC marketing campaign. Let's say your website infrastructure can't be SEO'd, or even further from that. Let's say it's not that it can't be, but it's going to be really, really difficult. So if your brand just has a website infrastructure that either you can't really get your hands on quickly or efficiently to make changes to, it's going to make SEO very difficult. Of course, it's still very important from a paid search standpoint to be able to make website changes, but as far as I feel like my experience has lent me to, it's much more important to be able to make those back-end infrastructure changes for SEO than to necessarily get paid search at least off the ground and running to begin with. So if you can't get to your website, I would absolutely say to focus on PPC at least for a little bit and see if you can get some good traffic built up that way. For the next one, if you've got a really long list of keywords that you need to cover with your campaign, specifically if you're in an e-commerce brand, let's say, and you've got thousands upon thousands of products you need to make sure are available to your searchers in the interface, PPC is going to be a great decision for you in this situation. Last year, actually, we had someone who attended our workshop at HeroConf, and they had an e-commerce brand that sold lots of building materials. So they had, as you can imagine, thousands upon thousands of products that they needed to cover. When I sat down to meet with them, they told me that they had spent months and months and months trying to really kick up their SEO efforts before realizing that they kind of needed to take that budget, at least for the time being, and focus on their paid search efforts to really expand their campaigns and their keyword reach and be sure that they could get up in those top 3 to 6 paid ad positions, because SEO just wasn't necessarily giving them the results that they needed for the list of keywords they wanted to cover. Another situation where I would certainly encourage you to choose PPC for the time being is if you're a little bit unsure about your target keywords or market. So with SEO, you're going to pick, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, you're going to pick a core set of 10 to 20 keywords that you're probably going to be focusing most of your effort on. If you're not exactly sure what those 10 to 20 most profitable keywords are going to be in terms of getting your searchers from the search engine interface onto your website, PPC is going to give you the ability to test out that market a little bit more directly. So you can bid on some longer tail keywords that you're not entirely sure if your searchers are going to be looking for you in this way, or maybe you do know that they're looking for more longer tail keywords and you've not necessarily uncovered them all yet. You can get a lot of that information out of a paid search campaign, looking at your search query reports, obviously seeing which terms and phrases bring in the bulk of your traffic, finding synonyms and different ways of phrasing those same terms. All of this is going to be an incredible way to use paid search to really learn more about your market if you're a bit unsure or you think there may be things you just don't know. Finally, on this slide, I wanted to talk about if you feel like you need some really specific tracking of where your revenue is being generated from, paid search is going to be a great option. So down to the keyword level in PPC, we can super nerd out and find out exactly which keywords are bringing in the most revenue. We find that this is incredibly useful from small business budgets all the way up to hundreds of thousands of ad spend in a month. If you can really track down to find out which keyword vein is pushing the most revenue or return for your brand, you can focus in more specifically on that vein and expand it accordingly. So paid search is going to give you the ability to do that. You'll know exactly which keyword is bringing you leads and conversions. All right, so this is my last slide before we have a little screenshot on paid search. I feel like I've been already talking for a year, but An option where you really are going to want to focus again on paid search at the moment is if you're focusing on leads and sales. So you're not necessarily looking for just an increase in traffic to your site, but you truly need your consumer, once they get there, to make an action. So whether it be to fill out a lead form or to purchase a product, you can really specifically track these account segments based on ROI. So this is similar to the keyword level. You've really got the ability to see which areas are pushing those leads and sales as opposed to just sending through clicks that aren't really doing anything. You can then cut the fat and get rid of any areas that aren't really returning, and then focus on the ones that are and expand those as you need to. We've already talked about this a little bit in a few of the other points, so I won't harp on it too much more, but if you really want to more directly control your results, SEO results take a little bit longer to come in, so you, of course, have to wait a bit longer before you can make another change. With paid search, you've got a little bit more direct control over those results, because if you see a change or a difference that is negative or is going to poorly change your performance, you just go in and start making some optimizations. Slowly, of course, so that you don't over-optimize or make too many optimizations and then can't track back which one was the beneficial change. But you have the definitely more direct control over how to change things up on a more frequent basis than you would with SEO. Another great idea that actually Eric kind of brought to my attention that I've overlooked a little bit is that with paid search, you can target users for specific devices. So if you've got a product or service and you know very specifically that it's beneficial 100% to iPad owners or iPhone users, you can target that audience specifically. With SEO, you can optimize towards those users and make sure that your site is mobile friendly, is tablet friendly, and things like that, but you can't truly target that audience in particular. So if you really need to do a mobile test and find out if that audience is going to return some revenue for you, PPC is the way to do it. The final point I wanted to talk about, and we're going to pretty quickly flip over to the screenshot on the next slide, is that let's say you just need to capitalize on the popularity of another product or service that's similar to yours. You can truly get incredibly competitive with paid search. When it comes to SEO, you need and have to focus on terms that are specifically relevant to your site and your brand. With paid search, you can almost pick out keywords that are related to or have a similar searcher or purchaser of that product to what you're offering and bid on those keywords as well. So what you see in this snapshot is that these paid search companies started bidding on the term Toyota Camry in some form or fashion because they know that people who are likely to buy a Toyota Camry may also be in a similar audience to those people who are going to buy a Nissan Altima or a Honda Accord. So they know that these are similar audiences and accordingly have decided to target them and say, hey, if you're considering a Toyota Camry, also look at this Nissan or this Honda. This is an incredibly competitive opportunity and certainly something that if you need to focus on really expanding your market base, you can tackle more efficiently through PPC than necessarily with SEO.
All right, fantastic, Kayla. Thank you very much. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the organic version of the screenshot Kayla was just describing in a little while. But so the other side of the coin, the other side of the real important segment of this is what sort of circumstance would you be in which SEO, organic optimization, might be a better fit for you? In a lot of ways, it's the opposite to a lot of what Kayla described in hers. For example, you need benefits in the long term. Okay, PPC is great if it is October 1st and you need to be selling some Halloween costumes by yesterday. Okay, that's when I'd say, hey, here's Kayla's number, give her a call. But if it's November and you said, you know what, by next year, I really need to be up there, I'd say, let's give organic a try. We want to be up there long term. One of the real benefits that we talk about for SEO is there's no faucet. When in PPC, when the bidding stops, the traffic stops. But in SEO, unless there's a drastic algorithm change or unless your site is offline, the benefits of an optimization go on and on and on, assuming it was done, with the engine's terms of service in mind and assuming that it was built on an architecture and content motivated plan of action. So, over time then ROI continues to increase because, the amount spent on a particular SEO campaign has either dwindled or it is done entirely. Another reason might be that current keyword bids for PPC are just too high to fit in your margins right now. It's interesting, 10 years ago this summer, it was June of '03, Yahoo bought the PPC vendor Overture. And we were sitting around, I was reading a lot of stuff back then, and I remember how everyone was sort of up in arms about, they're going to make a 5 cent minimum on all these bids. And Kayla's probably rolling her eyes now because, good luck finding very many bids right now that are 5 cents. I mean, it rises with the cost of living. If you don't have $4.50 to spend on a click for, the best iPhone data plan, or, at a minimum, $1, $2 for a lot of less competitive stuff, you might be out of luck right now. And the other thing is, you might not know exactly what a smart use of bid dollars is. It might take you $1,000, $2,000 for your particular industry to find 2 or 3 terms that are really going to be money makers for you. And maybe you don't have that margin right now when you could spend, a similar amount of money on some SEO consultation that would open up your entire site to visibility. You could start to pull in traffic from all corners of your site, assuming A, you have a great deal of content, and B, you are an expert or a pioneer or someone who's really into the type of business that you're working with. So that's another reason. A third reason, again, like the opposite of what Kayla was talking about with her audience psychology point. If you are with an audience that maybe already knows a lot about ads, doesn't maybe trust ads, knows a great deal about the difference in the organics and the paid, a surprising number of people out there surfing in the general public don't really know or don't pay attention to which is organic and which is paid. They just say, oh, I figured the one at the top was the best. And that's a mindset that we deal with constantly. And it's very smart to exploit that mindset because, there are filters in place, whether you're in organic or PPC, that really do make sure that the best rises to the top. But there are some audiences that will gravitate naturally toward more organic or towards more a paid part of that page. Again, going back to the point about not knowing or having, a site that deals in topics that maybe are not either that highly searched for or that there's not a lot of research behind. Maybe the thing that you have that you're selling, the product or service, people might not know about it. So in that sense, you might come up really dry when you're doing an AdWords search or trying to figure out what it is you should actually bid on. In one sense, Kayla talked about you need leads and sales, and this is not to suggest that SEO does not provide leads or sales, but at the same time, it can provide a much wider swath of traffic with much less risk. You can get 5,000 visits from SEO, and you don't need to worry necessarily if 4,500 of them aren't going to produce because they cost all the same, assuming that you had some SEO work done. Whereas with PPC, you might be really reluctant to dive into a different keyword vertical just because you think, well, I'm just not sure that we're going to find that much if we spend X dollars, or if we spend, a certain amount of our budget this month on this particular thing. We just don't have the confidence that we can test, that thoroughly. Okay. Another thing, and this is for me, it's near the top of the priority list, is that you have time and patience to really make this happen. You're really looking at your business with the long view in mind. And that is, like we talked about the Halloween costumes, 1 year from now, here's where I want to be. 2 years from now, I want to be, above the fold for this super competitive 2-word phrase, or 5 years, I want to be the industry leader in this. And on the organic side, we really preach a long view to our clients just because, we're in this for a long-term relationship, and we want to help them, not just bring in the traffic that they're going to, but really become authorities in their fields. we don't really chase algorithms because Google itself is not necessarily building an algorithm. What Google's doing is trying to find the most relevant results and pinpoint them to distinct queries. What we try to do is help make sure our clients are, producing the content that they, if users, would want to read. And it's really, and the sort of the catchphrase is, the secret is there is no secret when it comes to that. It just takes time, and it takes a great deal of research into your industry, and it takes a great deal of knowledge about it. And so, people come to us and they are experts in their field already, and or they're starting out and want to be, and we just try to get that onto the site. So time and patience is, if you have that in relative abundance, we think SEO may be for you. And let's say you have more content and research resources than you have actual dollars. You have some people working for you. They want to take a stab at this. They're technical, or they're very content focused, but you don't have a great deal of extra income in the marketing budget. This is where we would put them to work and say, let's see what he or she can do on the content front. Let's see what this person can do on the technical front. Here are these recommendations for us. Let's put, they're already built into the salary of these people. Let's get them working on this and apply that effort there, instead of having to peel off additional marketing dollars for the paid clicks. Kayla's screenshot was compelling because on a query for Toyota Camry, just try to get Nissan's site ranking organically for the query Toyota Camry. It's not going to happen. And so that's a very, she pointed out a very compelling use for PPC is that you're capitalizing on other brands, the popularity of other concepts and images and products and services. Organically, you have to be a little bit more creative. If you have, for example, a site that does a lot of what YouTube does, or you have a software program that does a lot of what QuickBooks does, but nobody knows about it. In that case, one example of recommendations that we would put forth is, there is certain disenchantment with a lot of products out there, even if they're the most popular. This image right here is an example of people searching for alternatives to various things. If you go to Google, and you know how once you start typing a query, it automatically suggests additional things. Well, if you go there and type alternative to, and it will just start throwing out things depending on what your next letter is. And this represents what people are searching for alternatives to. So if you can produce a compelling alternative to something that's already out there, this is one line of queries that a lot of people don't really know about. But it does require a lot of research. It requires a certain level of disenchantment with an existing product out there. But believe me, just about any product out there, there's a little bit of dissatisfaction with it. So this is how I would, make a comparison to the screenshot about the Toyota Camry. And it does take a little time, but again, the effort, the effort and the results are long lasting. At this point, Kayla's going to talk about, some further criteria, some further instances and decisions that you can make to help you choose between the two.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So we've definitely covered a ton of situations where you could more specifically make a decision towards paid search or SEO if you need to make that decision for your brand. Also wanted to just make a quick reminder to everybody, if you've got questions and you want to send them to us over Twitter, use hashtag PPC SEO, or you can send them to us in the chat screen here within the actual webinar control panel. Okay, so what we're going to ask you to do is, once you've taken a look at those two lists, kind of sit down and make a pros and cons list for both PPC and SEO for your brand. Now, you need to do this objectively, which is sometimes very difficult, and that's how I get to my next 2 points, which is that you need to also maybe bring in an outside opinion and analysis to audit your efforts and see which one has the most opportunity, is truly giving you the best return, and it allows you to remove your emotional ties to what you assume works. If you have a biases either way towards PPC or SEO, of course, it's always very simple and usually pretty easy for me to make an argument towards PPC for nearly any brand. And likewise, probably very simple for Eric to come up with a list of 10 reasons why SEO is a better choice than PPC. What you have to do is truly take a step back, look at all of the facts and figures objectively, and decide which one you can and need to focus on right now for the greatest return to allow for a long-term benefit. Basically, what we decided it comes down to is you need to decide how well you know your market, and that can also be difficult to look at objectively. It's certainly not easy as a brand manager to realize that you may not know as much about your market as you thought you did 6 months or a year ago, or maybe ever at all. So you have to really look at that and decide if you know truly who your market is. That can help you help sway your decision one way or the other, most definitely. It's also very budget based. We talked about a lot of reasons why if you don't necessarily have a large budget and you have a fairly competitive paid search marketplace, it's going to be really difficult if you've got a little limited time in order to see those results come back. It's going to take some optimization, and you're going to have to spend an increased amount of budget to test those things out. If you've got more of a hard cap budget, SEO is a little bit more easy to rein in and specifically differentiate how that budget gets used. Also, definitely want to make sure you take into consideration how quickly you need to see your performance returns. So if you need results within a couple of days, paid search is going to be the way to go. If you really have more time and patience, like Eric was talking about, then you can definitely wait and do a more long-term SEO plan. So essentially what we want you to do is try both and compare. It sounds really easy, and it's probably easier said than done, but really give both a shot. Test them out. We really strongly urge you to not decide on PPC or SEO before trying both. That's how you really figure it out and find out how much return you can get out of each medium. Make sure you take a look at what your goal metric is, be it revenue, if it's traffic to your site. You really need to set out that metric first, and then look at the key performance indicators for each varying marketing medium and see which one has more key performance indicators you can control to get closer to your goals for your metric, your overall goal metric. Obviously, the last thing you want to do is be short-sighted about this decision. So again, an objective point of view, and don't rush your decision. If you can at all take enough and maybe even more time than you assumed you would need to make the decision, you want to take that time. It's incredibly important, and no matter which one you decide on, you're really making a long-term decision for your brand on where you're headed in the marketplace. So certainly try both, compare the two, and then run with the one that's going to have the best effect for you and your brand at that time.
All right. Circling back from what Kayla was saying, we're bringing it back to where we try to figure out, is it possible, even though we just spent the last half hour talking about which one, A or B, should you use, is it possible to get them both back working together in some capacity just because of the mutual benefits that they provide one another? So using it to kickstart the other. Again, you know, a lot of bigger companies that have simultaneous full-time SEO and PPC campaigns going, there is, or there should be at least, a great deal of interaction between those two teams. Hey, look what our biggest converters were this month. All right, thanks. We're going to take that. We're going to build out some content so that organically we can start ranking better for those phrases so that you can take that PPC cost and you can allocate it elsewhere where you want to test. It's almost like, you know, in an army marching forward, there's the front line, the scouts out there, and then there are the people in back who are taking what the scouts say and making tactical decisions about that. The neat thing about a dual performance model is that both sides, PPC and SEO, take turns being the scout, and both sides take turns being the decision makers that take that information and decide what to do with it. Test out, you know, and Kayla was talking about using both of them and deciding and contrasting, you know, the various metrics between the two. Take one out, see, run one for a while, remove it, see what actually happens to the bottom line. Does it affect, you know, does pulling PPC also decrease the amount of clicks you're getting from SEO? Research from Google, now remember, this is Google who sells ads for a living, they say that it does, but there's been no compelling refutation of Google's study that says that there is sort of a multiplier effect to the fact that having a presence in PPC and SEO is a good idea. Try to build a model to alternate and optimize for both. You can see my competing sine waves here, where the red could signal SEO and the blue could signal PPC. The net X value of both those lines is the same, meaning you could be spending the same amount, but every 30, every 60, every 90 days or so, phase out one, bring in the other. Take what you've learned from the previous 90 days with PPC and take the next 90 days and build some SEO around it. Instead of, just sort of blindly going out there and trying to optimize everything, which I think a lot of people do. They make mistakes in doing that. The previous 90 days with one discipline can give you a tremendous amount of insight about how to spend the next 90 days with the other one. And again, this is terrific if you have, a finite amount of resources, whether financial or staff power resources. This is a fantastic way to really make both of them work for you if you are limited in that capacity. And finally, we recommend looking at other expenses within online marketing and saying, look, is this really necessary? Now, I'm not trying to bash bigger analytics platforms, but I'm always surprised when clients come to us already saying, well, yeah, we're spending $3, $4, $5, $10,000 a month on platform X, and I'm not here to bash any of them. So I'll just say any of the big data analytics platforms, which are terrific and can give you a great deal of value, but they're using them to watch rankings, or they're using them to pretty up the Omniture or the Google Analytics reports that you can make pretty nice looking on your own. It's in effect, they bought a Corvette to drive to the grocery store and back. And it's just not an efficient use of their time when, with the right human resources behind it, you can often find the exact same data through your PPC or SEO vendor because they've just crunched this stuff for so long, they know it. So, if you're really looking for a way to work both of them in there, examine the other online marketing expenses and make sure that if you're spending $5,000 or $10,000 on X, that you're getting that back and then some. It's just tragic sometimes to see the people that bought into a major platform just because they know their competitors run on a similar platform and they think they're missing something, but they're just not getting any value out of it. So Kayla, do you want to take us through the roundup?
Absolutely. So obviously we've covered a ton of information. We're going to break for questions here in just a second, but we really wanted to wrap everything up in kind of 3 great sound bites that really drive home the purpose and drive behind how and why to make the decision between SEO and PPC when you have to, and where you can go from here now with all of this information. So ultimately what we want you to remember, and we understand especially as agencies that offer both of these services, is that you can't always control when and if PPC and SEO can be done, if they can be done simultaneously or have to be alternated. So truly you just need to make the decision objectively for yourself and then go in the direction that you truly believe is going to be most beneficial. So in those situations where you can't, really, like we said, take the time to properly choose which is going to have the greatest impact. And most importantly, as Eric was just explaining, we really want to make sure you can get the other, we call them sister marketing mediums, sort of back up and in full action so that you can get that overall web presence covered, make sure you've got an organic and a paid listing on the same page, truly saturate the market and make sure that your brand has the highest level of touch to your potential customers in the marketplace. So with that, I think we're going to kick it over for a few questions. Like I said, we've definitely got some time here, so we should be able to answer quite a few questions before we wrap up the webinar itself. In the event that we don't get to all of our questions, like I said, we're definitely going to get together and put together some answers and responses to those and post those on PPC Hero. We've also got some really interesting offers that both sides are kind of throwing out to our audience and the attendees today. So from IntraPromote, they're really offering to help you sign up for a Google Webmaster Tools audit. That's an incredible benefit. So if you want to take advantage of that, just make sure you click on that URL and use the webinar 126 password. Likewise, Hannafin Marketing is offering a free solutions blueprint, which is essentially a mini account audit. This is for any accounts that are spending more than $15,000 a month in ad spend. Of course, you can go to that link. We also have HeroComp coming up in April, where you could come and attend and come to our workshop, where you'll literally sit down with an account manager and dive into all of the intricate portions of your account. So we'll also be sending out some follow-up information about that after the webinar, probably tomorrow afternoon. Anything you think of after the webinar wraps, if you've got additional questions, Eric and I would love for you to reach out to us directly. We've provided you guys with our email addresses and are definitely more than happy to reach out and communicate back and forth if you come up with some additional questions for us. So Eric, if you want, go ahead and you can facilitate a question or two if you'd like.
All right, I'll do that. There was one from early on that is PPC focused, so I'll throw that over to you. And then following that, there was a great SEO question that just came in. So
Awesome.
First off, what have you seen trending for B2B clients who have long sales cycles in terms of PPC effectiveness? What's going on in PPC that can benefit or potentially harm B2B clients that have long sales cycles?
Absolutely. This is a great question. I think that what's important for any long sales cycle brand, be it B2B or B2C, is really you have to have some patience. And then there are some great attribution models that have been released in the last year even that have made it incredibly beneficial to truly track. Let's say your sales cycle is months and months long. How is paid search directly influencing that sales cycle? So whether it's a first touch, a middle touch, or the last touch that actually drives the conversion or the lead, as long as you know that that's your sales cycle and you don't look to have a conversion happen too quickly and you dig down deep to truly look at which marketing mediums are attributing to that final sales, you're going to be able to make the decision either way, whether paid search is working or not. I will say this, I've seen a lot of situations with longer sales cycles where the client tends to sort of give up a little too soon. So they understand that their sales cycle is long, but they don't see the overall contribution of paid search because the sale is coming from a direct lead where they go straight to the site after they've seen a paid search and click that ad previous in their sales cycle. So you cut off paid search and then what you see is a really quick knee-jerk reaction to, well, wait, what's happening to all my volume? Well, the truth of it is that paid search is what's filling the top of that funnel, and then you're using your organic and direct traffic to siphon them down and pull out that conversion or the sale at the end. So all I would say is just to be hesitant and truly make sure you're looking at how PPC is contributing, even if it's not the direct sales pusher.
Kayla brought up some really good points there, and one of the topics that she brought up is worthy of an hour-long webinar itself, and that is multi-channel attribution. And I think that's going to be really, really hot this year. Google Analytics has it, other data platforms have it. It means are we giving credit to the sale for the click that came for the last time through organic or SEO? But what about this visitor? And what if they came originally 3 weeks ago through a paid ad, and then they came 2 weeks ago through your Facebook page, and then they came finally today from an organic listing and they finally bought something? Historically, it's been really hard to figure out how to give credit to those other mediums when the sale didn't take place on that. But multi-channel attribution is telling us, and again, I'm kind of going back to that cliched point of here's why you got to have both going at the same time. But it really helps us model and say, wow, of all the PPC sales that we had today, a quarter of them came originally from an organic, a long tail thing. Maybe they remembered the name of the brand and they couldn't remember the name of the article, but they just knew what the name of your company was, and they found quickly the second time a PPC ad, and that's what took them there, and they'd thought about it for a while. They made that decision. Prior to some really good multi-channel attribution models, it was really hard to see the effect of how social media networks and organic and paid search really work together. But this is, they're now offering some really smart insights. So if you use Google Analytics, for example, there's a report based entirely on multi-channel attribution. In other words, how do we attribute this sale or this visit to the multiple different channels that people can arrive on. So I believe there's some setup that you need to do, but it's not difficult. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. I was just going to say, Eric, to piggyback off that really quick, if the multi-channel funnel report is shaking anyone's head loose at the moment, definitely go check that out because it's incredibly beneficial. And I know that some brands have just kind of forgotten to go back and check it out because it's not been a part of the marketing scheme and the analysis before. But a surprisingly large amount of prospective clients that I speak to haven't even implemented some version of multi-channel funnel attribution to really truly make that decision. So if we've just surprised you in any way with dropping multi-channel funnels on you, make sure you check those out.
right. Let's move on. There's someone who had another great question about SEO, and that is if SEO takes time to gain momentum and benefits continue after you stop SEO, how can you really test it over 90 days? Is that enough? That is a very good question. Let me give an example. I think 90 days is a really good period, and I'll tell you why. When we do a full enterprise level site audit of an existing site, we move in, we earn a client, and that's the first thing that we do. We gather information, and probably it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. So anywhere from a third to half of that 90-day period is spent creating a very large document saying, okay, we examined 25 different things, and here is what we found that is hurting you from an organic visibility perspective. Here are the things that we think you should tackle first. Here are the things, that can wait a little while. Here are the things that can wait a while, maybe till your next redesign. And here are the things that are no problem whatsoever. When we do that, we list what we think is going to be achieved by fixing these things. So we can sort of put a triage on that and say, okay, this is the most important thing because it's keeping maybe a full third of your site from being indexed, or because it's not allowing engines to know the difference between these 100 pages that are very different, in fact, but Google doesn't know the difference because of some ways you coded them. You can do this in 90 days if you can rapidly implement changes once they've been recommended to you. And second, you can do this in 90 days if you know what to expect, if you have a chart of what to look for in terms of improvement. In other words, okay, in 30 or 45 days, we'll say, A, here's what to change. B, here's what it's doing to you right now. And C, here's what you can expect if you can get this changed rapidly. And then, so let's say you can get those changes made in the next 45 days. After that, you can just start watching the effect of that. And if you were to start up PPC at that time, any benefit you'd see from PPC would not cloud or pollute the data that you're getting from SEO because they're so very easy to discern the difference between them in analytics. In other words, you can run a full-on PPC campaign and you can watch and see whether you're having that organic impact or not because those two reports are so easily separated. So that was a terrific question. I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to give you the process that I think is appropriate for the first round of changes. Now, if you can't get everything implemented in the first 90 days, maybe you take a break, and while you're running that PPC campaign for another 90 days, you're doing other organic, making those recommendations that a firm gave to you with in-house staff. And so once the PPC 90 days is up, maybe it's time to see round 2 of those organic changes and see how those are working. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. I think we got one more question through the chat and Twitter, at least for now, that we'll go ahead and Eric, I actually think it's a good question we can both tackle and sort of give our own responses to.
Okay.
Question is, how long would each method need to be tested to decipher whether the better choice is going to be PPC or SEO? So I think that my overall opinion on this is that it's very much dependent on your brand and the vertical that you are marketing in. So, if it's a generally low traffic volume vertical, it's going to take you a little bit longer to determine, which one, a PPC or an SEO test truly gives you, we preach statistical significance in the Hannafin house. So, you don't want to make a decision until you have enough data to make the decision. So if you've just not generally got a large volume or a highly competitive site or vertical necessarily, it's going to take longer for that data to accumulate from either source. And of course, I generally think in paid search terms. So if it takes, 4 months to get a statistically significant amount of data back from a paid search marketing effort, it's going to take, potentially twice that long to get the same amount of results out of an SEO test to compare against one another. So I would say that keep in mind, you don't necessarily need to test paid search and SEO for the same length of time. You just need to get the same amount of data back from the two, so it's an even comparison.
Right, that's good. Boy, that's a challenging question, and again, it does boil down to what level of competition we're starting, that we're starting off at. Um, Again, and I hate to say it, but it is going to be an answer where I say it varies. If you just want to start getting on the radar with certain terms, I would, once you make, let's say that we found a great deal of forensic issues on your site, that we found a lot of crawling and indexing things. We found a site of 7,000 pages where Google may only know about 2,000 of them or something like that. And once those changes are made, Google starts to notice that at the next time it crawls. But it doesn't notice them all that way. It might take anywhere from 30 to 60 days or more for it to process all those changes that you've made to the site. And at that point, whether or not it's worked or is starting to work should become evident, because you'll start to see traffic increasing. You'll start to see a much broader keyword report. You'll start to see a much greater number of pages being landed on from organic channels. And for a little sidebar, with Google's whole issue of not always reporting the organic keyword that was used to arrive at your site, one of the best ways to measure your keyword effectiveness now organically is to spend more time looking at your organic landing pages versus your organic keyword report. It gives you less direct data about how many keywords or which specific keywords are coming in, but it does tell you overall, hey, wow, my section on blue widgets is doing really well versus the red widgets section, which could obviously use a little help. If you are really focused on being the top of your niche for some really competitive 2 or 3 word queries, you will probably be best off expecting a slow climb over a longer period, 6 months, a year, 2 years or so. If you really are sort of coming out of nowhere and want to really be a top performer within an industry, you have and one of the things we're constantly trying to battle is expectations, because we will often get prospective clients to say, hey, I need to be ranking for a 2-word query and I need it in 30 days. And it always, you hate to turn down a client, but they're not going to be happy with what organic can do in that short period, especially since they're likely starting from nowhere. So we try to really map out expectations honestly, and say, look, the more competitive you want to be, no matter what you're going to do, you're going to have to really be an expert in your field. You're going to have to produce this content in a way that engines can see it, that people can pass it around and share it socially, that's going to be visible to engines, and you got to keep doing it constantly. And then, and you're going to have to do it for a while, but we'll show you how to do it. So, again, you can start to see lower competitive results within, a month of really making some significant changes to your site. But if you really have high aspirations, it's going to take a while, but it can happen.
Awesome. That's a pretty well-rounded response there. Great. I don't think we've got any additional questions that came in there since the end on our end. Eric, do you have any that are pending?
No, I'm checking Twitter and I'm checking the webinar, and I think we have covered them.
Awesome. Well, like I said before, we definitely encourage anyone who's got questions that they think of after the webinar. We're going to send out the recording tomorrow, most definitely, so you can all sort of log that and go back to it to reference. Of course, if after you're looking at it again, you think of some questions, please, please, please send them to Eric and I. You can send them to us direct through our email addresses and reach out to us that way. So thank you all so much for attending our webinar today. We will be releasing our topic and subject matter for next month pretty soon. And we look forward to seeing all of you in a month. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you, Kayla.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay, bye, everybody.